ojo, el mejor meta de competitivo de Fortnite. Ojo.
What is the best and the worst competitive season? Obviously, you know, it's outside of Chapter 5, Season 3. Well, I ranked every single season starting from Chapter 1, Season 6, all the way up till now, and based them on how good the meta was for the time, how enjoyable was the season's tournaments, what tournaments were available, and what the prizing was, and finally, would this season be good now if the next season you played was this all over again? I then added all of these scores together and created the definitive list of what is the best and worst seasons, and I'm sure no one will ever disagree with this, ever, because they never do. Alright, so let's start things off with Chapter 1, Season 6, the first season that really had competitive in it. Now, the meta, pretty horrific. Heavy snipers, grenade launchers, quad launchers, rifts, traps, mounted turrets, you name it. All around pretty horrible. But enjoyment was really high for competitive because this was the beginnings of online tournaments. There were alchemist and scavenger pop-up cups, which essentially gave you no prizing. But instead, they gave you a little pin. So if you got to a certain point threshold, they gave you a reward. Fun. But more importantly, there was the first Winter Royale online qualifier. So this was actually $1 million event. The finals of was held in the next season, but there was online qualifiers this season. That was really the first time that this had been done. So because of that, I'm going to give it a 3 for the meta, an 8 for enjoyment, a 4 for tournaments, and then a 1 for would it be good now, because no one would enjoy this now. Next season in Chapter 1, Season 7 was a generationally horrible meta, which had quad launchers, rocket launchers, grenades, boomboxes, which only lasted like a patch or two, but still. Bottle rockets, rifts, hand cannons, P90s, grapplers. You could still carry 10 minis. There were sting grenades, planes, heavy snipers. I actually wrote rocket launchers twice. That's how many there was. And of course, to start things off, it also had the Infinity Blade in there too. This is what I mean, a generationally bad meta. 1 out of 10 for meta, just in case you were wondering. And for tournaments, they ended up having more pop-up cups, kind of similar to what we had before. But then there was the finals of the Winter Royale, which we already mentioned, which was the first big online event from memory, which was $1 billion. Also started testings like the first Trios Cups. There was the big Share the Love event, which was the first thing that Mongo really ever won. So overall, it was good, but 1 for meta, that was stinking it up. 9 for enjoyment because of all of the various reasons we mentioned. 4 for the tournaments because, you know, there were still no real really good cash cups, but there was an improvement over the last season. And then a 1 for now as well. Next up is Chapter 1, Season 8. And this is a personal favorite of many people. Now, the meta was much better than the previous that we've seen so far. You know, it was like a pump attack meta, which was cool. Flint knocks were added, peppers were for good mobility, the shadow bombs, launch pads, glider redeploy. There was some kind of frustrating things like heavy snipers, boogie bombs, the drum gun, a lot of explosives, you know, a real trend in Chapter 1. But there's also like the baller meta, which it was kind of stupid looking at it, obviously, looking back, but in terms of some of the mobility items we've seen so far, it wasn't actually the worst, because you could still like spray them out and things like that. The tournaments, though, the tournaments this season were incredible. It started off with ESL Katowice Royale, which was one of the first big LAN events held by a third party, where basically everyone's drop spot got nuked like 2 days before as they were flying to the event, so all the NA players got like nothing. There's also a lot of big online events that were practicing for the World Cup qualifiers, which are like Scallywag Cup, Deluxe Cups. There's a Gauntlet Cup. It was really good. And then, of course, the big ones were the first 4 weeks of the Fortnite World Cup was held here. Also, this had a lot of bugs with the pirate cannons, which I've showed in a lot of videos already, and they are hilarious.
There's no way the cannon just bugged.
I'm going to tell you, this is going to get a good scoring. Meta, I'm giving it a 6 out of 10 because, you know, ballers, too many explosives and things like that, you know, not great. Enjoyment, I put 8. I'm putting 9 out of 10. That's a 9 out of 10. It's World Cup qualifiers, like, of course. That's like one of the peak. Almost a 10 out of 10. Tournaments, 10 out of 10. Let's be real, this is like the best season of tournaments, especially with the prizing. And then the now, I put a 9 out of 10. Very high. But you can't tell me if you went back to this season, even though the meta's a little questionable, with all these tournaments, you would love it. So very highly rated for Chapter 1 Season 8. And of course, Chapter 1 Season 9 is going to be really similar to that. But I will say the meta this season was significantly worse, predominantly due to the addition of the combat shotgun and the legendary and epic tactical shotgun. Now, if you know anything about that tac, I hate it. It's really stupid. And it was even worse back then. and the pre-nerf combat shotgun was also incredibly
la
powerful.
pre-nerf
The drum
combat
shotgun
era-
was also added this
era
season, and
brutal.
on
Uy,
release
la
it
drum
was
shotty.
horrifically overpowered
Borren ese arma, por
too. So the
favor.
meta, a lot worse, but this also still had weeks 5 to 10 of the Fortnite World Cup qualifiers,
Esa
plus
play
the
de
World
Mr.
Cup
Savage
finals.
fue-
The map was
fue
one of the
cine.
best ever, with places
Yo
like
recuerdo
Neo
verlo
Tilted,
live.
Mega Mall, lots of
Fue cine
diversity
eso.
across the whole map. Map mobility with the slipstream.
Ah,
I
sí,
put
la
a
movilidad en
3
ese
for the
mapa fue
meta.
muy buena.
That's fair.
O sea,
The
en
meta
ese
was
season.
awful. 10 for
Los
enjoyment,
slipstreams ayudaban
10 for
bastante.
tournaments, and a 9 for now.
Ajá,
If
sí,
this
que
was the
era
season you were
divertido.
offered with all this money in the World Cup qualifiers,
Ahí fue
you
donde
would love this.
Buga
Chapter 1, Season
ganó la
8.
World Cup.
I've put so many videos
Season
of
X.
mechs
Todo el mundo se
on
va a
this
quejar de
channel,
esta
but
season.
I guess this is
Pero
just
a
going to
mí,
be another one now.
personalmente,
Not only did this season have the
me
mechs
gustó
in the meta
mucho
for
sin
most of it, it
quitar
was
los
kind of
brutes.
nerfed
O
a
sea,
lot
sí está
towards the
súper
end. It
loca
took
la
way too
meta,
long. We're
pero a
just going
mí
to
personalmente
count
me
the
gustan más
mechs
los metas
as
así.
in the full season.
Y-
There's also rift zones, which were incredibly annoying,
creo
like
que-
Tilted Town, the area where you just couldn't build. Our
Creo que
retail
la
row,
gente
which was
desprecia un
incredibly
poco esa
powerful,
season,
pretty
pero
much
para mí fue
defined all
Pick
of
Fortnite
FNCS,
esto.
where you had the cube monsters, and it was
Pero ahí es donde
incredibly
pasó
overpowered.
un poquito
There
el
was
declive
Taco
de
Time in
Fortnite
Greasy
también.
Grove, like what were they thinking? Where you
Lo
would
de
just start
Taco Time sí
dancing
estaba
randomly
mal.
in the middle if you walked into a
Era
POI.
gracioso, pero-
Funny clips
ajá,
from that
hablando
season.
competitivo, no-
Horrific
no era muy
map,
bueno.
horrific meta. Well, the map was actually kind of cool now that I think
El
about
mapa
it. And the
estaba
shotgun meta
buenísimo.
was good because it was back to like pump tack, which you know is one of my favorites. But meta,
Y ahí es donde
horrific.
estaba
Now
el
this gets
trío
another
supremo, la
massive bump up for the
MMM de
tournaments here
Monger
because they
Mythos
were
y
insane.
Mr.
The
Savage.
FNCS, this is kind of the first
la
season where it
SFNCS
actually
fue
was
la primera
hosted,
FNCS y
season
fue
X,
brutal,
and the prizing
honestamente.
was literally insane.
Solo
If
por
you
el
won
prize
a
pool.
week
Ah,
of
mira
the
eso.
qualifiers, of which, by the way, there were 5 qualifier weeks, goated, you'd earn $96,000
wow.
on you. That's
No me acordaba de
$32,000
eso.
per
Sí
player
recuerdo jugar,
because it's in
pero
trios. And if you win
no me acordaba
grand,
que eran
it was
5 qualifiers.
$480,000. That's $160,000 per
Wow.
person, which was
Creo que te-
truly insane.
tenía un poquito más de prize
And
porque
even
la World
outside
Cup
of
puede
that,
ser.
solo cash cups and trio cash cups
tenía
were also nuts too. There was
demasiado.
2 solo cash cups a week, and if you won one, it was either 2.5K or 7K, depending on which one there was,
Lol.
and you could play both. And then there was a trio cash cup as well, and if you won that, it was $18,000 to the winning team.
Wow.
So money this season
cups
and
era
tournaments went crazy.
brutal
And
cada
as a
semana.
note, I put they
Imagínate,
introduced the Middle East
$18,000
region.
por semana.
So meta 3 out of 10.
Sí.
This was a solid
era muy
3
loco.
out of
Mucha
10
gente no le
meta.
gusta.
You know, mechs, all that stuff. Enjoyment, I put 2. I think that's generous. Because this season, you
A
know,
mí sí
with the
era
mechs and all that,
disfrutable.
that enjoyment, most people really hated a lot of this season. Tournaments,
Sí,
though,
los mechs
10 out of
cagaron la
10.
perspectiva
No
de la
doubt
gente,
it's 10 out of
creo yo.
10. Now, would people enjoy this now? I've put a 5 out of 10. I feel like people could put up with these mechs in the Rift Zone meta if you had these prizing back. So I've gone with a 5. Maybe that's a little low. I think it was pretty good myself. Moving on to Chapter 2, Season 1. Now, this was kind of a
Damn.
blank state for not only competitive, but for the base game anyway. So the meta was incredibly,
Este meta
incredibly simple. You basically just had
era
like
muy simple.
AR,
Para
burst
squads
AR,
estaba
a heavy
bien.
assault
Creo que
rifle,
porque
and then the
creo que
shotguns
por
were like
este
stack and
meta
pump.
es la
And then
única
you had some
season que
ancillary
squad
weapons like the
realmente
SMG pistol
funcionó
sniper.
por el
And
simple
then it
hecho
was
de
just
que era tan
launch pads
simple
for
el meta.
mobility, and you had
Era
rocket
launchpad
launchers.
rockets
The
y eso
season
era
did start
todo
with grenades
interesante.
in, but they were a little
Y
broken
creo
because
que la
you
única
could grenade strap
actualización
with
que hubo
them,
en
so they
esta
ended up
season
getting
fue
removed.
el
But there was
el
no
arpón,
mobility. I put launch pads.
que
There
no
was no
ha vuelto, por
mobility. I
cierto.
lied
Se me
about
hace
launch pads.
súper bueno
Sorry.
aún.
So yeah, really blank state meta, but it was a squad season. So no mobility in squads actually makes a lot of sense combining these two together.
que creo
New
que
map
sí,
enjoyment was pretty high.
por
It
eso
did also
funcionaba
introduce the
esa-
first
ese
platform
meta
cash cups,
con
so
el
it's split
formato de
between
squads,
PC and
porque era más
console. So you
simple,
had
entonces
basic and
tiene
mobile as well. So
sentido, pues.
depending on whatever you wanted to play,
Tanta-
you had
tanta
some sort of
cosa en un-
tournament.
en un meta
And the
arruina
prizing was obviously very,
también el
very
juego.
insane as well. For some reason, they didn't actually run squad cash cups. Like, it was a squads mode for FNCS, but it didn't run squad cash cups, so it made absolutely no sense. There was also still 4 weekly qualifiers. You had
squad
heats, you had
cash
grands for
cups. Wow.
FNCS, and then there was also the DreamHack
¿Recuerdan
Winterland.
algo
So,
que había
you know, for
como Friday
competitive,
Night Fortnite?
we were swimming in it. Got even better, of course, when it came to December
había una
time.
buena
and
Winter Royale.
for some reason, Epic Games decided to throw $23 million into a duo Winter Royale.
Sí.
So I put 9 for tournaments. Hold on. This is a 10. Sorry. Sorry. I've changed it to 10 out of 10. How could I do that? The problem with this season a little bit, which will bring down our enjoyment score, was squads is boring. It's boring to watch. It's also boring to
Sí,
play.
es-
It's hard to find teammates with, and
Squads
especially
es-
back then.
son
And
meta bien.
on top of that, the season
no
was
tan
the
divertido,
longest
honestamente,
season of all
squads.
time. It was
Trios es
127
buenísimo.
days. So basically, after FNCS ended, there was like
Nice.
2.5 months of just solo cash cups. So people were kind of starting to lose their mind a little bit in there. But, you know, the season introduced a lot of also really interesting things. Boats, fishing, swimming, 100% chest spawns as well, alongside harpoons. There's a lot of really good stuff this season. So for meta, 9 out of 10. No mobility, super solid. Fishing, 100% chest spawns. Like, you really can't complain about the meta. Enjoyment, I put a 6 because it was kind of a boring. I feel like this is like a season where people look back at it and they're like, oh, this was really great. It was really fun. But in the moment, it was so long that it just ended up like really dragging on and being kind of boring. Tournaments, 10 out of 10. 4 seasons in a row where I put 10 out of 10 tournaments. You can't not have a 10 out of 10 tournament with a $23 million Winter Royale in there too. Now I've put 9 out of 10 as well because, let's be real, anyone would go back to play that Winter Royale for just the free cash that was there. Same having that meta. This is aged incredibly well in my opinion, outside of the enjoyment at the time, which wasn't very good. Right, controversial one, Chapter 2, Season 2. Now, if you're a casual player, maybe you didn't play a lot back then for tournaments, but this season was very hit or miss. If you were a casual player, you loved it. If you were a pro player, you also probably loved it. If you were the average competitive player, this season was kind of very frustrating. So this is the first season that really introduced mythics into the game, like consistently. And it was basically a season where you get mythics or you die to mythics. You know, you had things like the Midas's drum gun, which is incredibly broken. The Sky's assault rifle, which still had 2 times headshot multiplier, so you just instantly die to it. There was like a kaboom bow. There was Brutus's minigun, which basically aqua conditioned the whole lobby from. There was a minigun meta where there was other miniguns all just lying around. You could take those remote explosives, heavy sniper. So the meta was not good unless you had a mythic already. So kind of introduced that idea of mythic drop spots, which I still am not that fan of today. Now the map was really good though. They did add a lot to it. It basically just became very additive to the season before, where season 1 was a blank slate and then they just added a bunch to the map. And tournaments this season were also incredibly good. This is one of the best tournament seasons purely because we had daily cups. You know, didn't really give you much prizing, but essentially got a little bit of prizing just for winning the tournament. There was also the first season which had console FNCS, which wasn't good for FNCS by any means because they did no broadcast. They did nothing about it. They just split the prize pool up. But it was good for the console players. And there's also the first 2-round cash cups. So this is kind of where that begun back in February 2020, long time ago. On top of that, we had 2 FNCSs. We had the first duo FNCS, which had 4 weekly qualifiers. Awesome. And then there was still the solo FNCS Invitational as well. So, I mean, 10 out of 10. Actually, another 10 out of 10 tournament season, now that I think about it. Really, really good. Lots of nostalgia this season. People love it, but controller players were absolutely insane this season because of the new settings. So that also is pulling our meta down. So for meta, I'm giving it a 5. Not that highest. Enjoyment, I'm giving it 8 because a lot of people enjoyed the time, but it was, you know, because it's a lot of people's favorite season, but I didn't enjoy it that much. Maybe my personal bias. Tournaments, 10 again. I'm just giving 10 for everything for these tournaments. Maybe I need to start reducing that. But there's 2 FNCSs. Come on, like, you know, what can we talk about? And would people enjoy it now? I've given it a 6. Chapter 2, Season 3. Now, this is one of my favorite seasons of all time. It had a super unique map that had a lot of water around it to really like showcase the new swimming mechanics. But it was another season which was kind of dominated by mythics again. They were a little bit more balanced than the previous one. But Catty Corner in particular was just like far too strong. You essentially had 18 shockwaves in the launcher, assuming that your teammates didn't also have rockets, so one person could carry 18 shockwaves, and everyone else just had like launch pads or crash pads. So this made it really unfair and unbalanced. So it was like one really, really strong drop spot. Outside of that, I really like the meta with the shotguns, like hack and charge is a really good combination. And they also made a really good change in reducing headshot damage from 2 times to 1.5 times. So some good things. I liked it a lot more than the previous season's meta, but it was okay. It was okay. Tournaments were really good though. This is the first time that DreamHack hosted a solo online event, like a big event that people can play. Please, can we have these back? They were amazing. Big prize pools, you know, basically a couple rounds. It was kind of like a mini solo FNCS that you could just play anytime. But speaking of solo FNCS, there was also a solo FNCS this season, but there was a solo FNCS last season. And we had 2 weekly solo cash cups, and there was the solo dream hacks. So basically everything was solos this season. If you know me, I love solos. There was too much solos this season. It's just everything was solos. On top of that, for the FNCS, they crammed 4 qualifiers into 2 weeks. So it was like you'd play 9 hours on a Saturday and a Sunday.
Eso no me acordaba.
Both weeks in a row, which, you know,
Eran 2 qualifiers
that was a lot. So tournaments, you know, all solos. Why were sharks in this season as well? It hurts me, but I think the meta here is a 7, which it was reasonably good. Catty launcher was a bit broken. Enjoyment, I'm putting 5 because of all the solo tournaments. Tournaments, 5, and now I would say probably 6, because there was a lot of events that people would enjoy now, but at the time it was just there was so much solo before it and then during it as well. It pains me to put that so low because it is one of my favorite seasons, I will say. Chapter 2, Season 4, Stark Season, baby. This is a big one. Now, they really made a good effort this season. I think this is the first time that Epic realized that mythics were becoming a bit of a problem, so they did keep a huge percentage of the mythics out of the loot pool, which is amazing. The only ones that really stayed in were Doctor Doom's Arcane Gauntlets, and they were like kind of mid anyway, so it wasn't really that bad. This season fishing was incredibly powerful because they just introduced shieldfish and jellyfish and all those kind of things, and there's spicy fish I think as well, so good mobility. The fishing became really strong. There's also really good map mobility where there was a lot of rifts, but a bit too many mobility items like shockwaves and things like that. I do think this meta maybe would have been a little bit worse had it not been for Mongrel Mitron Tayson like dominating it and making it such a special season. But let's be real, the actual shotgun meta was really good because it was very easy to get yourself a gold pump. You could just 50-50 land on a Stark chest. You get good loot from it. You get good shields. For tournaments, this season became a little worse than the previous because the qualifiers were reduced down to 3. And prize money was removed from those qualifiers as well. They did add the reboot round, which was super high, and there was still a lot of good money for winning FNCS, but the prize pool was still split between console and PC, so it kind of made it so that the winning teams didn't get anywhere near as much as they would historically. Like, it was $111,000 for winning, which is 37k each on EU, which is the biggest. Now it's even it's like 100k or something. I can't remember what it is now. But they did add monthly DreamHack solos, which was pretty awesome. For meta, I'm gonna give this an 8. Being able to get gold pumps and stuff and just one pump everyone was fun. Enjoyment, it's got to be a 9. Gotta love landing on a Stark chest. Tournaments, I would change that to like maybe a 7, I would say. And now, I think a lot of people would still enjoy this meta if you went back to it. So I'm going to give this maybe an 8 as well. Chapter 2, Season 5. Now, this is where competitive almost peaked. There was like 800,000 people watching the broadcast for FNCS Grand Finals, which was really incredible. And I had a very interesting shotgun meta that did not involve pump for once, which usually I don't like. But there was the Dragon's Breath shotgun, the charge, the tack, and the lever. And at the time, cruising off the lever didn't even feel that bad because all of the other shotguns had like negatives to them. I love a charge shotgun, I would say as well. But there was no launch pads, there was just bouncers for mobility. You had kind of sand tunnel gimmicks, which is a bit rubbish. Incredibly balanced season. This is probably one of the best metas we've had and just one of the best balance. But also it had some of the best tournaments. Now this is the year following the Winter Royale. So this one hosted the $5 million Frosty Frenzy. Bit down from the previous year's $23 million, but a $5 million where you just give away money is kind of insane for tournaments to start with, obviously. But I did have a bit of a problem when it came to FNCS because this is, again, the second season where they've removed qualifier money from FNCS, so people weren't really trying that hard because there was no reason to. The top teams, essentially, if you had a good week 1, and maybe done okay in week 2. There was no reason to try in week 3, so there's a lot of griefing that went on in this season. So, and a lot of trolling and things like that, which was kind of annoying. So FNCS actually ended up being good in the grands, but a lot of the weeks did not end up being that good. But there was a lot of fun tournaments here, like the Laser and Fresh's super knockback event. I can't remember. They're testing like arena box fighting, and there's some other throwback tournaments in creative that were also really nice. And this is something a lot like Fortnite modern tournaments are missing. There's not like a lot of creativity in a lot of them. So they really tried to test a lot of new things this season, so really good. Meta, 8. Enjoyment, 8. Tournaments, 8. Now, I think I'm going to give it an 8 across the board on everything there. Chapter 2, Season 5 was a really good competitive season. Chapter 2, Season 6. Makeshift weapons you can craft with the Primal shotgun being super stupid. The crafting, generally, actually, the crafting mechanic was kind of slow and annoying. Just give me a good gun. I don't want to have to craft it into something better than give me the pump. It was cool you could always get like a good pump. If you found like a blue makeshift, you could craft it up. That was fine. There was like some sort of trajectory and loot paths you could take for that, but it was just kind of boring. Snipers were kind of like bows, which was actually incredibly powerful, whereas you could just do like a 212 headshot damage with mechanical bow, which was really strong. And despite the primal shotgun being like really broken on release, it did get nerfed considerably, so it wasn't that bad. There were a lot of stink floppers, which were in competitive, and for some reason there was no metal in the entire middle of the map, and we had raptors in cash cups. Why? Please tell me why. In 2021, tournaments were pretty much the same every single season, but obviously this one did not have the $5 million Frosty Frenzy. So this meta, that's a 5 meta. I'm being generous by saying 5 for Primal Season. Enjoyment, 3. Nobody enjoyed Primal Season. If you did, you are lying right now. You have goggles on, or glasses, whatever it's called. Tournaments, it was kind of similar to this previous season, but without Frosty Frenzy, so I'm giving that a 6. And now, 3. unsurprisingly, I do not like Primal Season. Chapter 2, Season 7. This was the alien-themed one. Now, the map changes this season were pretty much non-existent. Every single season, people were asking, please, can we have like bigger map changes? And then they just changed the center of the map instead, which is kind of frustrating.
Ese
A lot of
mapa
people has also got
faltaba
worse this season because of like the
faltaba
alien
mucho.
abduction theme.
O sea, le
The launch
faltaba
pads came back. But one of the most annoying things that
mucho
were
los
in the
cambios
game
de
for the
mapa.
most
No
season,
sé, cada
or for
season
most
que
of the
hacían
season,
un
was
cambio
the
de mapa,
alien
lo quitaban
parasites, which
inmediatamente.
basically stood on your head, and if you shot them, it
sea,
just
cada
negated
season
any headshot
solo
damage,
cambiaba el
and
centro
they
del
allowed you
mapa
to,
y
like,
una
I think, sprint a little faster, but jump a little
minimalista.
higher as well.
O sea,
Fighting someone with an
terrible.
alien parasite on your head was so
Ey, las
frustrating.
vacas estaban
But
súper
I will
cool.
say, for solo cash cups, the item, the inflatable that they added, was one of the best mobility items of all
Sí.
time. It was super, super balanced, and I wish they would bring it back, to be honest with you.
Ojalá vuelvan las
Meta,
vacas.
it was really
O sea,
balanced, to
era
be
muy
honest
igual.
with you. Most of that like shotgun and AR meta was really balanced, but because of the parasites, I'm going to bring it down to like a 7 overall, I would say. Enjoyment, most people thought this was relatively okay. It's getting a 6.
Sí.
Tournaments, it had 2 FNCSs, the solo all-star showdown and
tenía dos
trio
FNCS.
FNCS,
Sí,
so we're
la
bumping that
invitacional.
boy up to an 8. 9, I think I meant to say the word now, but I just said 9. I think a lot of people would be really fine if this meta came back now, so I'm also giving this a 7. And the final
fue
season
un
of
buen meta.
Chapter 2 was Chapter 2
La
Season
última
8.
season del capítulo
Now,
2.
this was boring. Hold with me, because it
No,
was
no
felt
fue
pretty much the
aburrido.
same as like the previous few seasons. A lot of the final seasons in Chapter 2, I think, were impacted by COVID, where not much really just changed, and that same map had pretty much been played for 2 years solid. The meta was pretty good, actually. The orange new crash sites were pretty
Sí,
good.
yo no
Sideways
siento que
areas were a
este
good way to get
este
ammo,
meta fue
but
aburrido.
Shadow Floppers kind of ruined the
Los Shadow
vast
Floppers
majority of the
fue
seasons,
pura
like solo
estrategia. La
cash
gente
cups,
usaba
dual
un
cash
launchpad
cups,
así
and like
como lo
early
están viendo,
FNCS meta
y
as
spameaban
well.
el clic
Tournaments, now this
derecho
had
y solo
some
volaban.
seriously good tournaments, because there was late game
Bien
cups that were in
interesante.
here. There was the monthly dream hack. There was cash cups
Ajá, bien
extra that
late
were
game
added if you
cups.
did good in the original
Dream
trio
hack.
cash cup.
Dream hack
There was
estaba
trio
hasta ese
FNCS,
tiempo.
and
Wow.
there was the Grand Royale, which was like what would turn into the end of year LAN in there too. Unfortunately, you know, the FNCS format had 12 reboot rounds, which was awful, and Grand Royale had 32. You basically had to win one of 32 games to get into the grand finals, which was truly horrific. But they did start adding things like community cups for skins in this moment for the FNCS skin in particular, so it was pretty good. They also added the first console championship cup, which was basically like the first big console cup since they removed console FNCS, which I forgot to mention earlier on. Meta, I'm giving this an 8, not a 5 actually. The Shadow Floppers basically pulled this down considerably. Enjoyment, I'm giving this a 6 because it felt rather
Siento que eso
repetitive
no bajó el
from the
meta, o
past
sea,
like
creo
few
que
seasons that were
Shadow
before it,
Floppers
and there was not a
estaban
lot of hype or like things like the Grand Royale. Tournaments, 8 because there was incredible tournaments, and now I'm going to give this an 8 as well. I think people would really, actually no, I'm giving it a 9. I think people would really enjoy going back and playing this season. I think really one of the only main issues was the Shadow Floppers. Chapter 3, Season 1. This is going to be another one which will probably be controversial to the casual viewers out there. This season was
fue muy
not
divertida,
good competitively.
pero
It was
competitivamente
very
sí, no
good
fue buena.
casually because a lot of people
Porque,
loved the skins, the
o sea,
collabs. This is a competitive breakdown, and those things don't matter for
escopetas eran una
competitive.
basura.
Now, the Spider-Man's web shooters were originally
ajá, lo de
incredibly
Spider-Man estaba
broken
bien.
for competitive, where they had 80 uses.
Después las
But they actually got
nerfearon
nerfed
para
down
los
to
usos, pero
10
eso
uses
estaba muy
only in
bien.
competitive,
Eso me
which was
gustó.
actually really good, and it became
Pero
very
esa
good
season era
mobility
pura
to use. You
SMG,
have to
había
think,
las
when am I
stingers
going to
SMG, ya
use
me
these
acordé.
10 uses? At
Y
what
esa,
point in the
esa
game?
SMG era una
Should I use them
tontería,
early,
o
mid,
sea,
end game,
una
and don't
estupidez.
waste them? So
Solo
they actually
la
became a
gente
really
no daba
good
ni
item
escopetas.
for
Así te lo
competitive. The
dejo.
worst part about this was just the meta was horrific this season. The striker pump shotgun that was added was
Sí.
too weak because it hadn't been buffed yet. So most players ended up just running the Stinger SMG
la
and
Stinger
an
SMG era
MK7.
rotísima.
Now, the MK7
Y esa
assault
R
rifle
también era
basically was
súper
not
roto.
balanced whatsoever because this is Epic's really first push into a lot of first-person weapons when you aim down sights, and there was no
Sí.
bullet drop-off or anything, so you could just shred people with the MK7, and then the Stinger SMG was so strong in box, there was just no need to take a shotgun. So the fighting meta was really, really bad. However, this season for tournaments did start the theme of actually just having one main cash cup for the main game mode, which is duos, and then one solo cash cup in a week, which was great. They did unfortunately run out of time this season, which meant that they only had 2 FNCS qualifiers, which we've just had this year, and it sucks. Meta, you're getting a solid 3 out of 10. Sorry.
Pero meta, a mí no me
Enjoyment,
gustó,
new
me
chapter,
gustó los
but meta was
Spider-Man.
frustrating.
Pero
I'm
de
giving
ahí
that
no
4.
me gustó ese meta.
Tournaments,
Estaba-
mid 4. And now I don't think people would enjoy playing this meta whatsoever, so I'm also going to give it a 4.
Debería estar
Pretty
muy bien.
low on the rankings. I know the casuals are mad, sorry. Chapter 3, Season 2 added a couple of really important things. Zero build which for tournaments was incredibly
lo veo.
important for keeping the cheaters out of build mode. Added
No se me hace
mantling
tan
and sprinting.
divertido,
I also forgot to mention
honestamente.
sliding was in the previous season too. And the meta felt a
Pero
little bit better
añadieron
because the striker pump
deslizarse, se
had
me había
been
olvidado.
buffed, so now it felt a little bit more usable. It was a launchpad meta overall, but to be honest, nothing really interesting
Launchpads.
happened in Chapter 3 generally, which is why Comp had such
volvieron.
bad viewership and the
Dubs
game was kind of not
solamente.
that interesting in Chapter 3
También
generally.
otra- fue otra
Meta,
season
I'm
de
giving this a
SMGs.
5. Launchpads, striker pump buff, sprinting added. It was pretty good. Enjoyment, I'm going to also give it a 5. People were kind of bored of not really interested in Chapter 3 generally. Tournaments, I'm giving it a 6 because Zero Build was added, which added another depth to the seasons. And now, I think if you took this again, I think people wouldn't really enjoy that much, so I'm going to give it a 5. Now, Chapter 3 Season 3 was very similar to Chapter 3 Season 2, outside of the fact that I had the Grapple Glove, which is just basically Spider-Man's web shooter again. But they did vault the Combat SMG, which was really broken in the previous season. So I'm going to give this a 6 for the meta, maybe a 7. Nah, 6. I'll give it a 6. Enjoyment, again, mid 5. Tournaments,
Sí.
6, same as the last season.
Dame.
And now I'm just going to give it a 5
ese
again.
capítulo
Same
a
as
mí
basically the
no-
last season,
no
but
me
with
movió
slightly
mucho,
better
la
meta.
verdad.
But Chapter 3 Season 4, that season was very different from meta and
Sí.
just tournaments. Everything was
Esa
really
season
different.
un poco
there. So for the
diferente con lo
meta,
del
this is
Chrome.
where they changed up
Lo
the
del Chrome está
shotguns
bien
a lot. And they actually used the
interesante.
prime shotgun, which a lot of people
Esa
loved
escopeta
because
me
it did
gusta.
more damage with the first shot
Ajá, con la-
in
el
the
primer tiro
magazine.
de esa
Whereas,
escopeta
now,
pegaba-
this is a bit of a gimmick, so
pegaba
I'm
mucho
not
más.
that fan of it. But they also have things like the Ranger shotgun, which again is a bit of a gimmick, so there's one shot. But if you actually
Esa no me
watch
gusta.
back from some of the tournaments, there was a lot of variety in which shotguns people decided to run this season. Launchpads were also turned into an item and a
red de la
throwable
Hammer era
item
muy
at that.
buena.
So they weren't just like a free guaranteed pickup. You have to
En los
think about
chili
if you're going to
splashes,
choose them
se
or
me
not.
olvidaba
So
que eso
meta,
existía.
I actually really like the Chapter 3 Season 4 meta. Tournaments though, now the tournaments hosted were incredible. There was no FNCS online, but was the first LAN back, which was the
Es
FNCS
verdad.
Invitational, which was really good. But rather
primer
than
LAN de
running
vuelta.
cash cups and all these kind of things that they normally would, they run divisional cups, which was a kind of ranked system where you could kind of go up to different ranks.
Eso
You
no me
enter
gustaba a
different
mí.
tournaments depending on where you placed in the previous
Demasiada
one.
cosa
This is
para un
something I
torneo.
actually hope they really add back. But there was also late game cups which are added, which did not work at all. They were bugged, but they were
Sí.
fun when they did for like the one event I was able to try, and then when it was good. So meta, 7 out of 10. I think that's good. Enjoyment, I think a lot of people really enjoyed this season. I did too. 8 out of 10. Tournaments, amazing tournaments. I'm giving you an 8 out of 10. Pricing wasn't always as incredible as some of the older
está
ones.
okay, el price
Now,
pool en ese
if we
tiempo.
went back, I think people would really enjoy this season, so I'm also giving that an 8. So highly rating Chapter 3
Creo que
Season
le dio
4.
muy
Who
alto.
would have thought? Not me anyway. Chapter 4 Season 1.
capítulo
A new
4.
chapter all around. Now this is the Shockwave Hammer
Sí,
season.
el
Now I think the
Shockwave Hammer.
Shockwave
El
Hammer
martillo
was
ese estaba
so
muy-
incredibly annoying.
Estaba
And it
roto.
was an infinite Shockwave. Like, it was really interesting
Era
this season
infinita
where Shockwave Hammer was in
y-
competitive. But the
Estaba roto.
shockwaves themselves, which were not infinite shockwaves, were held out of competitive. The Red Eye Assault Rifle was also like one of
Sí,
the
no sé
least
qué pensaban.
skillful ARs ever. It was far too easy to
Creo que
hit
es la
massive
última
damage
vez
with
que
this
vimos una
thing,
variación
so
de las
I
shockwaves en
wasn't a
competitivo.
massive fan of the actual meta this season at all. But they did add the most useless movement mechanic, which was hurdling, which just never works properly still to this date. But they did add
Sí.
reality augments, which I thought were a really good addition to the game.
Los
Tournaments
augmentos
hit the divisional
estaban cool.
cups, which was really cool, but they also introduced
Pero
the solo
siento que
victory
daban
cash cups
mucho
this time,
RNG,
and it had a
y eso no me
10-game
gustaba.
final if you never played them back then, which was really, really good. But one of the bad
Yes,
things that happened in
me
Chapter 4
partías en la
Season 1
final,
was that
wow.
they added the region lock. So you could not
Ah,
play
sí, pusieron
multiple
region
regions
lock.
of
Eso
cash
estaba pura
cups,
mierda.
which was very annoying, and servers were
Honestamente.
just horrific. This goes for all Chapter 4 seasons, but we'll come back to a big one in this later. Servers were awful, and server performance in particular felt like you were playing on like 50 plus
Pero es
ping
que,
to
o sea,
whatever
los
you would
servers eran
normally,
una basura por
which
lo
was
mismo del
really, really
Shockwave
bad. So for
Hammer.
meta, I'm giving this a solid
No
like
ayuda eso.
5 out of 10 because 4 out of 10 because of Shockwave Hammers. Enjoyment, I think a lot of people enjoyed this, even though the meta was really bad. I actually think this was still quite an enjoyable season, so I'm going to give it a 7. Tournaments,
Sí, era divertido
tournaments were pretty
jugarla,
good. I
pero
think the victory cash cups allowed you to make good money, and
Tenían
the divisional
muchos
cups were good.
problemas.
FNCS was on. There was a qualifying
le cayera
path to
alguien
get
en
to
el
the
cubo, lo random, porque
FNCS
usó el
Global
martillo,
Championships at
era
the
una
end of the year.
tontería. Y que
So I'm going to give
destruyera
tournaments a
todo,
7 as
también
well.
otra tontería.
Now, I think a lot of people would enjoy this season as well, so I'm going to go back to a 6. Next season, Chapter 4 Season 2. Now,
Esa
this
fue
was the
una muy buena
Kinetic
season.
Blade season, which was
La katana
really good
era
meta
muy
for
god.
some of it.
O sea,
Now, this season it was really hit or miss. Like, some parts were really good and other parts were really bad.
Sí.
Let's start off with some of the cool things they added, which was mid-game objectives. So the first one being Loot Island was
islas,
added
es
this
cierto.
season,
La
and there was also
isla
the
te daban
combat
puntos
caches
en
that were added. Now, I
torneos y
still think
todo.
combat caches are probably the most balanced
caches
mid-game
estaban-
objective.
estaban
Please get the
bastante
bunkers
bien,
out.
como
Just
un
give us
búnker.
combat caches again. I think they're really, really good.
el
Unfortunately,
búnker me gusta más
they
a mí.
added the slurp juices with these, the buffed slurp juices,
pero es que
which
eso-
were really broken,
son
and you
heal
could
of
get them
meta,
from the
ya me
combat
acordé.
caches or from Loot Island as well.
O sea, eso era lo
which I
malo de
just
esa
think they were
season,
just a
que
little
la
bit
gente
too
usaba
no,
los
they're not a
slurp y
little bit too over.
splashes
They were
y,
way too overpowered. And as soon as you were
y las
fighting someone to
pizzas,
pop
es
one, it
cierto,
became
y la gente
incredibly
ganaba en
frustrating.
zona.
There was
Eso
also
es
the
una tontería.
overclocked
Eso
pulse
no me
rifle,
gusta.
which you got from Loot Island, which was insanely broken. Plus, heal off this season was so bad because
Ahí
of the
está,
reality
lo
of
que estaba
it,
diciendo.
pizza time,
O sea,
where you could get the
una
pizza and you could
tontería,
just
heal off.
infinitely heal. You had slurp juices, you had med mists. A lot of
Que-
chapter 4
creo que
came
en
down to
esa
tons
season
of
pusieron la
laggy heal
mecánica
offs, which
del-
was incredibly annoying. Same thing at the end of the season,
de
they
lo de
also
la
added the
tormenta.
ODM gears, which
Que te
was
mata
so
ahora.
frustrating for solo cash cups and for dual cash cups towards
Ah,
the
la
end of the
cosa
season.
no-
So
de Attack on
meta
Titan.
this season, not great for a lot of it, but like those were all the additional things. The stuff like the kinetic blades, the rifle, the AR shotgun meta, like those were really good.
La
But a
katana
lot
era
of
muy
the
god.
additional things that came on top of that were just very, very frustrating.
Wow.
Because of the kinetic blades not being shockwave hammers, I'm still going to give it a 6 on the meta. Enjoyment, I'm going to give it a 6 as well. Tournaments, I'm also just going to give it a 7, the same as the previous season. And now I'm going to give it a 6 as well, the same as the previous season. I did really like the map changes that were added in this season, though. I've got to say, like Mega City and the whole kind of southeast biome that was there. Chapter 4, Season 3's meta, not that great. It had
ese meta no
slurp
me
plants,
gusta.
which basically
Lo único que me
encouraged a
gustó
lot
de
of
esa season
surge
fue
trading.
una
The new middle
pistola
map was
que era
cool.
la de-
I like that.
la
The
pistola
way you could
de
go around the
de
vines or
mamut,
whatever it was called was
literalmente.
pretty awesome. I like the mudsliding added.
pero
The flapjack
a mí no me
rifle,
gustó
45
esa
bullets.
season.
You could just
Me
spam it at
pareció
people
una
was
basura.
kind of just frustrating because they just never stopped pressuring you. You could never heal. Mammoth
Sí.
pistol meant you just kept getting headshotted for massive damage all the time. It was annoying. Slurp juices
pero
still
igual
in,
era
not
divertido, o
nerfed.
sea.
And the flare gun was also very, very annoying.
Sí, ese
Tournaments
meta
kind of
no
stayed
me
the same
gustó.
as previous
Estaba-
as well,
estaba
which
un
was really
poco
good. There was a good
basura.
lot of consistency there, which was awesome. But yeah, servers were just
competitivo no
also
estaba buena.
completely awful too. Meta, solid 5. Enjoyment, I think, was a 6. Tournaments, same as before, 7. Now, I think we also give it a 6 for the now. Chapter 4, Season 4. Now, this meta was interesting.
Ese
The
meta me
Twin
gustó.
Mag AR was kind
Estaba
of
roto.
like the Red Eye from
Ese R
Season
estaba
1,
roto.
but not as broken, I would say. It was, if you had
El
good
meta
aim,
sí
like you
estuvo
were
bueno.
just frying
O sea,
people with the Twin Mag AR all the time because it had very minimal reload.
a mí me
Especially
gustó.
since it was a crash
Me
pad
gusta la
meta
variedad
where
que
people would just
había,
crash
lo de
pad
las
and you could
míticas,
beam
que
them out
podías
the
elegir
sky.
qué
But the
mítica
main
querías.
issue here
Eso estaba
was
muy
this
bien.
was peak lag,
Honestamente.
in particular in the FNCS Global Championships.
cierto, había
This
mucho
was
lag en los
one of the
servers, pero por
laggiest
los-
tournaments,
por los
maybe the
cohetes esos.
laggiest tournament to date that I've ever seen. Actually, that's not true. The Red Bull event that I went to in this
Wow.
season last year was the laggiest event. So yeah, not great. No FNCS, but the FNCS Global Championship was held, which is awesome. For the meta, I'm giving this a
Cierto,
6,
la
mainly
FNCS.
because they added forecast towers, which I hate. Unfortunately, they're incredibly frustrating. I think this was an enjoyable season. I'm giving it a 7.
A este man no le gustan
Tournaments,
las
I'm going to
torres
have to
de
give
la
this a
tormenta.
5.
Esto
Even though the
es
Global
terrible.
Championship was
Para mí
there,
son
the
muy
lag
buenas,
made this unbearable.
personalmente.
And now, I'm giving this a 2 on now. Actually, maybe a 3 on now, let's be real. The
Wow.
lag, if any player goes back and watches tournaments from this chapter, trust me, you don't want to play tournaments in that kind of lag. It was genuinely horrific. Chapter 4 OG season that we're seeing. Now, this is a complicated one because the meta was
la
really all
season
over
del
the
OG
place. It was like a
estaba
4-week,
súper
monthish
nice.
long
O sea,
season where the meta just
un
continually
meta que iba
changed
cambiando,
with
pero que
every single
estaba
update
balanceado, en
every
mi
week that was
opinión.
out. So it's difficult to say what
Yo
the
opino
metas
que
were,
el-
but for the most part, they weren't that great, I would say. On
Esa season
average,
fue muy
I would
buena.
give
Bueno,
this like a 5.
en esa season
There
yo
was a
sé que
lot of
mis primeros
mobility, a lot of kind of
earnings
explosives that were in there
me
too.
pareció muy
It was really
bueno.
difficult to get shields because they were incredibly rare, which was very frustrating.
es
So I'm giving it a
verdad. Al
5.
principio no había muchos escudos.
This is a solid 2 out of 10 for tournaments.
Sí, no había
because
muchos torneos.
it was all
Solo habían
open
Clash
tournaments,
Cups.
no 2-round tournaments, and they were all just full of cheaters. It was just cheaters all the time in this, and
Sí.
honestly, it felt like a real regression of the game for OG in that sense. Enjoyment, I'm going to give it a solid 7 because despite the
divertido.
tournaments not being that good,
Eso
it was
sí.
still just nostalgic and fun to play in the OG season regardless. Now, would people go back and play this again? Probably not. They probably enjoy the nostalgia of it, but not necessarily actually the tournament aspect because they were pretty bad. So I'm going to give this a 5. Moving on to Chapter 5, Season
Ya en el
1.
capítulo 5,
Now, this
este meta me
season
gustó
introduced a lot
mucho,
of
el de la
interesting
primera
meta
season.
changes, in
Me gusta
particular the
mucho ese
heal change
gancho que
where you
había.
could walk whilst using medkits
También
or big
cambiaron el
pots, which
movimiento.
made heal off kind of frustrating because what this meant
heal
was
off
that
fue el
medkits
único
slowly
problema,
gradually
pero-
went up over time. So now
Pero
you
para
can
mí fue
actually heal off
divertido ese
not
meta.
just with med mists and
Bonito
slurps
aprenderlo.
and
Se siente
floppers,
nuevo,
but now
fresco.
medkits in particular became very, very important for heal off. And this was a lot
Sí.
of what happened in Chapter 5 Season 1. They did also add bullet drop, which I know a lot of people really don't like and they want hit scan weapons, but for competitive, bullet drop, in my opinion, is absolutely the right decision, because some of the issues that I've already mentioned in the previous seasons with hit scan weapons being too easy to use when you look down the scope are completely negated by the fact with bullet drop. So I think bullet drop would change for competitive all around. I know a lot of people don't like it, though. So this season added weapon mods, which I think, to be honest, has been done pretty poorly throughout the entire year. I think weapon mods should have been able to just be moddable without a mod bench, but in season 1 they just added mod benches inside vaults that were inside of the mythic POIs. And these mythic POIs gave you a mythic weapon, but also gave you a medallion, which gave you infinitely recharging shield. And the more medallions that you got, the more shield and the faster that it would actually give you. So I really didn't like the fact that there was like 4 incredibly strong drop spots on the map all at once that gives you massive advantages. If you've watched any of my videos, you know I'm not a fan of medallions. So the meta was really annoying, but I think bullet drop off and the rest of the weapons generally were pretty well balanced outside of the auto shotgun, which was really obviously a bit too strong. So for meta, I'm going to give this a 6. For enjoyment, I'm going to give this a 7. For tournaments, similar to all the other seasons where you just really have solid tournaments that lead up into an FNCS Global Championship, so I'm giving it a 7. Now, would people go back and enjoy this? Probably yes. I think it was not that bad of a season, so I'm also giving it a 7. Chapter 5, Season 2. Now, this is the Grim Gate season, which was a very odd season competitively, because similarly, the medallions ran
la gente rotaba muy
fácil. Course, you had the agility medallion, which was Cerberus's medallion, which famously Peterbot and Pollo ran through the whole lobby with. Now, there's a lot of frustrating things in this season, like the Thunderbolt of Zeus, you had the Chains of Hades, and there was also a DMR meta where they added the DMR and also waterbending towards FNCS as well. So there was a real boring Surge meta, and the fighting meta was kind of boring because of the Chains of Hades, which took up a lot of parts too. The mid-game objectives were bunkers, which are really not well designed in my opinion whatsoever. Much rather have combat caches instead. And again, weapon mods are just still kind of pointless because now those weapon mod things are in bunkers rather than being in the mythic drop spots either. They did add the wings last second, which was really cool, but they were out for almost the entire season because they were so bugged. So many tournaments were bugged as well. It introduced the worst and most annoying shotgun of all time, which was the Gatekeeper. So for meta, I'm giving this a 4. For enjoyment, I think it was fun to play. I'm going to give it a 6. Tournaments, same as always, we're getting a 7. And now, would people enjoy this to play back? Probably not. DMR meta was incredibly boring, so I'm gonna give this a 4. We're almost done. Chapter 5, Season 3. Just 1. Let me just list everything wrong with this season, okay? Nitro Fists, Surge Trading and Plants, cheaters in every tournament. The Nitro Fists, I already mentioned that, but I'm saying it again. The exploits where people are flying into the sky. The infinite healing cactuses that got nerfed towards the end. Gatekeepers, which I mentioned previously as well. Meta changes 1 or 2 days before Grands. The infinite exploding bow that was in the start of the season. You get randomly kicked out of games for no reason. There's an auto reload bug. There's a coin that gives you infinite nitro where you can just run into everyone's box. Nuka-Cola means you could just heal infinitely. There was also a fall damage bug with a bunch of nitro as well. I could keep going. There's a lot wrong with this season. Hate it. But they removed region lock. So yeah, tournaments, I'm going to give this a 3. Meta 1, enjoyment 1, now 1. In case you're wondering, that will be the worst season of all time. Just nothing compares at all. And finally, the current season, Chapter 5, Season 4. I really like this season. I will say, I think this is one of the best metas we've had. The mythics this season feel much more balanced. None of them are really like super broken and worth landing on. Medallions also feel way more balanced. The only one that's really broken is the scan coin, which comes from the raft, which basically the wall hack coin that repeatedly scans players around you. That one is incredibly broken and it's really annoying to fight. But overall, I think the rest of the meta is nowhere near as bad. I'm going to give this a solid 8 for the meta as well. Enjoyment, I'm also going to give this an 8 on enjoyment. I think this is a really enjoyable season all around. And for tournaments, I'm going to have to go with an 8 as well. Global Championships this year, which was really good. Cash Cups are super solid. They're attempting reload cups, which aren't really working that well, but there's a lot of potential in them, which are cool. Now, well, I mean, now is kind of irrelevant because this is now, so I'm going to give this the same as the enjoyment, which is also 8. Now, let's see the overall scores. What is the lowest and the worst season overall? I'm finding out at the same time as you. Unsurprisingly, Chapter 5, Season 3, worst competitive season of all time. Nobody here is shocked whatsoever. Second worst is Chapter 3, Season 1. I know the cows won't be happy about that. And then Chapter 1, Season 6, which again started competitive. There wasn't much in it there. Followed by Chapter 2, Season 6, Primal Season. So not unsurprising.
Oh,
The
gee,
highest. Ooh, we have a tie for first and second. All right, coming in at number 3 is Chapter 1, Season 9. The World Cup season. Basically heavily carried. That's so funny.
Wow.
I had a 3 out of 10 for
O
meta.
sea, el man piensa
but
de que la
because
mejor
enjoyment
season es
and
season 9.
tournaments
Yo
were 10
opino
out of
que
10,
la
and now
mejor
is
season
9 out
fue
of 10.
capítulo
I've
2,
managed to make it all the
season
way up to
3.
third. That's incredible. I can't believe
Wow.
that. Coming in second place, actually tied with first,
Ah,
but
no,
I'm giving
espérate.
it to the other season, is Chapter 2, Season 1, where we had an incredibly good meta.
Espérame, que
Everything
está
was really well
cocinando.
balanced. Nothing was really too broken. There was no mobility.
está yendo en
and it
orden.
was squads which
Realmente
fit
esa no
well. I
era.
can't believe a squad season's come this
Okay.
high. But most importantly, heavily carried by the prizing this season. 4 weekly qualifiers for FNCS. DreamHack LAN, we had Winter Royale duos, which was $23 million. And the only reason this probably wasn't a little higher is because the enjoyment was a little low rating because it was such a long season. But number 1, Chapter 1, Season
Vaya,
8.
Season
the season
8
which
también.
started the World
God.
Cup qualifiers, weeks 1 to 4.
Season fue
ESL
buenísima.
Katowice Royale. You know, meta was
divertida.
still pretty hit or miss. Only a 6 out of 10 meta.
fue
But
pick
enjoyment
Fortnite,
tournaments
pick
and now
competitivo, en mi
were some
opinión.
of the highest ratings possible that you could get. Now, let me know which ones you are. I know everyone else disagrees
Mira
with
que
these,
Season
but if you
8
want to
fue
see
muy
more
buena.
of my rankings, you can click this video right here to see me rank.
Sí, definitivamente. O sea, yo creo que Season 8 del capítulo 1, pero es muy buena, me gusta mucho, pero Chapter 2, Season 3 para mí sigue mi favorita. Siento que es donde el juego más cambió y fueron cambios buenos, en mi opinión. Honestamente, sí creo que esa fue la mejor chat. Sí.